on Cordy, and I swear I was just trying to wake her up, obviously. Next week, I've got to do some recording on some fairly involved music, and I'll be going to Real World Studios, which is super exciting for me. I'm not going to tell you too much about it at this stage, but basically I'm going to be recording 5 tracks, and some of them are around 15 minutes in length, others are more simple ballads. But I'm going through the stage now. I was actually involved in the recording, so there's parts of this that I kind of either wrote or improvised, and then there's other parts which were originally played by someone else, where I'm going to be learning those parts. But I thought I'd talk about how to kind of memorize big chunks of music, I guess, and my process as it is for this sort of stuff. So this is also going to be setting the template for what I do for the next week, because I've basically got a week now before I go into the recording studio. The first thing I would say is a good thing to do is to get all of the material together and put it on your phone, so that any time that you're doing stuff, whether it be driving somewhere or walking around, exercise, or kind of otherwise dead kind of time. Historically this would have been done a lot of the time whilst I was travelling, but at the moment I'm not travelling too much. So you've got all of the things that you need to be listening to. So this might be if you've got a wedding gig coming up and you've got sort of 20 tunes that you need to learn for the month or so leading up to that gig, or definitely the week leading up to. I'd have that kind of on rotation, whether I'm in my car or whatever, so that I'm passively kind of learning the material, so that hopefully by the time that I come to try and actively learn the material, I've got more of a chance of knowing what's going on. The other thing is that generally when you're in the car, or however you're doing this passive style of listening, you're also not going to be trying to play the guitar along to it, which can sometimes be a bit of a distraction, and you might miss things that you might have otherwise noticed. So it can be a good way to pick out little intricacies. For most of my gigs I don't actually use notes or anything, but I've got my notebook here that I have used in the past for stuff. So for instance, the notes that I've made for this is a gig where I had to do some acoustic stuff. All of my notes are just the name of the song, the tuning, and where the capo will be. That's what I've written down for that gig. Similarly, I've got another gig here for a wedding, and what I've written down for most of the tunes is just the name and then the key that the band are going to be playing it in. I've seen that I've got Friday I'm in Love, which is a Cure tune, and for that I've written down structure a little bit. So chorus times 2, verse times 2, B section, chorus solo verse, B middle 8 verse, chorus times 2. So if there's a song where I'm less familiar with the actual structure of the tune, sometimes I might actively listen and then kind of write down what that structure is. Or another note that I've got here is Last Night, The Strokes. I've written down 16-bar intro, verse, chorus, verse, 4-bar stop intro, solo, CFG, chorus. So these notes aren't actually probably for me to read again, but they're evidence that I did like an active listening and literally sat down and listened and wrote down what was happening. And I think that exercise in itself can be what helps to keep the thing in your memory. Further back in time, I did used to have more notes. So for instance, I've got Champagne Supernova written down here, and that's written out in terms of 8-bar intro and what's happening. And then the chorus, I've written the chords down for that. Interlude, bridge, I've written the chords down. So if it's a song where I've really never played it before, my notes used to be more involved, to the point where there used to be songs that I'd have kind of the chord structures written out completely, but we're talking then way back early in my musical playing career or whatever. So when it comes to the active listening thing, what I think it's sensible to do is kind of start one song at a time. Don't necessarily have a guitar to hand, so if you need to write down the keys for sections, but you also want to be able to write down what those sections are. So whether that might be a lyric cue, so if it's a verse, or a pre-chorus or a chorus, maybe you put like a little lyric cue next to it, just to jog your memory for what that is. And what I generally be writing down is things that are of note. So a verse and a chorus, if there's another verse and a chorus, listen for things that are different this time round. So maybe, you know, the verse is half as long, or maybe it's a double chorus the next time. Those are the pieces of kind of bigger information that I would be making notes of, not necessarily of individual notes, because if you're having to look at notes for what the actual chords and all that sort of stuff are, I think you're going to be relying on your notes a little bit too much. I'm going to go and do some active listening of a tune now, and I'll come back and I'll write down what the notes are that I've written for it and just discuss that quick. Right, so I've just listened through the tune and made some notes, and so far the notes are 1 page of this little notepad, which is probably too much reliance so far on the notes, so I'm going to go back and listen through it all. But basically what I've written out is intro in E major, part 2 of the intro is in A minor, and I've written verse 1 picking, lead line, because there's a little bit where I have to play a lead line picking, and then I've written a vocal cue, and then I've written second part of the verse picking with a dotted delay. Then it goes to a chorus where I've written clean picked. Verse 2 I've written same again, so repeat, verse 2 is the same as verse 1. Chorus I've written here as before, but first section doesn't repeat. Then I've written intro, but this time it starts in F. So I guess what you'll notice there is I'm writing the differences between those sections. So I'm not relying on the notes to know what those sections are. I'm going to make it so my memory has to do that. If you're having to look at notes for what the actual chords and changes are, then I'm thinking you probably don't really remember the tune. So in terms of actual memorising a tune, to me it seems a bit pointless to work on writing those down, because you're going to rely on what's written rather than actually memorising it. Then there's an acoustic interlude, and then it goes back to the second half of the chorus times 2. There's a 16 bar break, and then we've got this 7/8 riff. So I've written down that the riff repeats 12 times in E, 2 times in C, then there's a stop section in E, then we go back to the riff 2 times in C, then 4 times in E. So that's like a section where up to this point I would have sort of been kind of guessing around that structure. So I've written it down, and hopefully that's going to stick in my memory a bit. And once I've played through the tune, and read that through a couple of times, probably it will start to come together. Then there's a piano interlude where I double up the piano part with the clean. So then we move to the outro. There's a slide-ish part for 8 bars. Then I've written 1 outro structure riff, back to slide, then another outro structure riff, then there's a lead part which I need to memorise, and there's an outro structure riff, and then we finish on another lead part. That's the notes that I've written down. In terms of actually memorising cues, I've written a couple of lyric parts down. For lead parts, if you're going to have to remember a lead melody, the thing to do will be to play that part over and over again. You know, we're talking sort of at least sort of 4 times, and then try and play that, and then, you know, really focus on whether you're actually remembering that part. And like I say, this is what the first part of the learning for me, that passive listening, so that you're hopefully able to recognise each part as it passes and sing bits of the tune. That to me, if you can't do that, you've not really memorised the song, and probably you're going to be focusing too much on what those little intricacies of the part should be. So what I'm suggesting is write down sort of overall level notes. So, you know, if a part occurs in 2 different keys, maybe you just say, okay, the intro is in E major like I've written here, and then when that intro repeats again, it's going to be in F major. That's my suggestion for how I'm going to learn each of these tunes. These are the notes, incidentally, for a 15-minute long song. So I'm going to try and play that tune through a few times. Focus on one song at a time as well, I guess, for this. It's probably the best thing. It's a pretty aggressive close-up in it. Anyway, I was just on a drive to pick up some speakers, and I've listened to the song that I was learning and that I was speaking about earlier in this video a bunch of times, and tried to sing each of the parts as I was driving, and then made sort of a mental note of the bits that I'm not able to sing at the moment, and then went back and looked at those parts specifically. So now I think I can pretty much play this song all the way through, which isn't nothing, given it's a 15-minute song. So I'm going to sleep on it, and we'll see where it is tomorrow, and that'll be when I upload this video anyway, I think. But so yeah, as I say, 1 page of notes I think is probably the limit, and try not to write down any specific chords or melodies, because those you're going to need to commit to memory for sure. It was 6:30 in the morning, and I just run through the 15-minute song 2 more times and listened to the bits that weren't going so well, and it's now time for a coffee. But sleep does a thing when you're trying to memorise stuff, and I'll just turn it off a sec. I think once you've slept on something you've been practicing, oftentimes you'll find that things are better the next day for some reason. But it's looking quite good, and now that tune, I'm fairly confident that I know it all the way through. It's just a case of practicing it to smooth out different bits. So good progress. So today we're on to the next song, which is I think 12 minutes. And then the next day what I'm going to do is do this same exercise, but so today I'm going to focus on this song, play it through, try and play it through until I can get it all, kind of correct, and so that I'm not forgetting parts. Then tomorrow I'll maybe start off this session again with this tune a couple of times, and then I'll move to an active listening with the next tune, which also happens to be another 13-minute long song. So I'm going to end up with a page of notes for this one and for another tune. And then once I've got those out of the way, the other 3 songs are really quite straightforward in comparison. They're sort of more 6-minute long tunes or 4 minutes, so that's fine. But this is exactly what I would do for a wedding as well. I wouldn't write down notes that are more intricate than kind of verse, chorus, verse, or if there's like instrumental breaks and stuff. Try and keep it at a level where you're just reading sort of cues from the page, not chords. I've seen and been on gigs with other people that are reading chords, and I think it's kind of obvious. So I think you should probably learn your parts so you're not reading the parts, and maybe then your notes can be, you're referring to bigger chunks of music that so you like the verse part, play this verse part, add a dotted delay for the second half of the verse, but you're not looking at actual kind of musical content. I think you need to memorize those. That's my suggestion anyway. If you got other ideas for how you memorize tunes, let me know in the comments, and let's try and open this up a bit. Maybe there's an easier way to do this. For me, I'm thinking mostly I will rely on my inner memory, and I've got a kind of aversion to reading notes off of a page, just because I think it changes the way that performance goes, and your reliance will be on that piece of paper. Generally, if I take this to a gig, I don't actually have to look at it for the duration because of the way that I've learnt it. That's the way I do it. If you've got a different suggestion, let me know. Obviously, there's going to be some gigs where it's less important to completely memorise stuff, and I know that some bands it's an accepted thing that you rely on sheet music. For me, that's personally not how I do things, but let me know. Hopefully this was useful. There's a buy me a coffee link in case you got anything out of this video and you like what I'm doing on the channel, but I'll tell you more about this project probably next week, and maybe I'll try and get some footage of what was going on, but it's quite exciting for me to be involved in it, so I just wanted to share with you what my process is for this kind of week leading up, and maybe I'll do a couple more kind of checking in with how I'm getting on with the parts, if that's interesting. Thank you for stopping by, and I'll catch you for another video soon.